Hello, United in Recovery. It's Matt. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and a follower of Jesus Christ, and I'm humbled to have the opportunity to bring you our next installment of our Renew series. So far in our Renew series, we've talked about how times change, about how God doesn't change, but that we can change. And last week, Will started the discussion of just how we can start to change by working the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th steps. And I think it's important to mention where this Renew series has taken us thus far. Steps 1, 2, and 3, the part about times change and God doesn't, that's all about us making peace with God. Steps 4, 5, 6, and 7, that's all about us making peace with ourselves. And now this week we're on to steps 8 and 9, which are all about us making peace with others. Now, you may have heard that these steps are in order for a reason, and to work them fearlessly and thoroughly means we work them in order. And there's sound logic behind that, because think about it. Until we've made peace with God, we'll never be able to have peace with ourselves. And until we make peace with ourselves and forgive ourselves, there's no way we're going to be able to find peace with others and ask for their forgiveness. Step 8 says, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. And step 9 says, we made amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Now, there's a lot of great resources around steps 8 and 9, the big book, the 12 and 12, and there's a lot of wisdom in all of them. But this week I was brushing up on these steps for this message, and I was led to the Joe and Charlie tapes. If you haven't heard them or you haven't heard them lately, I suggest you check them out. I think the 30 minutes they do on steps 8 and 9 is some of their best stuff. And one of the situations that they talk about is one that we all probably confront when we're working our 8th step and we hit that name on our list, you know, that name, and you say, there's no way I can or ever will make amends to that person. Maybe we harmed them, but suffered just as much or more harm from them. But as Joe and Charlie so appropriately point out, we're only concerned with our side of the street, our part, and how our part caused harm to another. If you're having trouble with that situation or having trouble just figuring out how to get started on your 9th step, they offer a little aid. They suggest that you get a piece of paper and split it into 4 quarters or boxes. And in the first box, you write now. And in the second box, you write later. And in the third box, you write maybe. And in the fourth box, you write never. And then you take every name on your amends list and you put them under one of those 4 categories. Now it's time to get started. And Charlie reminds us, from step 3 onward, God is with us. And if we're willing to do these things, God is going to make it possible to do so. That's a really important point, so I'm going to repeat it. Charlie tells us that from step 3 onward, God is with us. And if we're willing to do these things, God is going to make it possible to do so. Joe and Charlie also spend a lot of time talking about the sponsor-sponsee relationship and how critical it is that you discuss your amends with your sponsor prior to making them. If not, we run the risk of causing more harm by rushing in or making a self-serving or not well thought out attempt at an amends. And a lot of times we'll find that becoming willing is an amends in and of itself, or that by becoming willing, we leave the whenever possible to God, and He decides whether to and when to make it possible. Think about it. By becoming willing, when God makes it possible by putting that person in our path, we have an opportunity to change the very nature of the relationship. If we're not willing and God puts that person in our path, it's very unlikely that anything is going to change. And finally, they get to my favorite part, the 9th step promises. We should really spend more time in these promises, and I'll tell you why. When I was a newcomer, I went to a daily meeting where those promises were read at the beginning of every meeting, along with the AA preamble, the 12 steps, and the 12 traditions. Those promises and the witness of some men who were a little further along in the program than me, who had started to realize some of those promises, that really kept me going. It gave me hope that if I followed the suggestions, worked the steps fearlessly and thoroughly with a sponsor, that I might have an opportunity to realize some of them in my life. Those promises are: if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we're halfway through. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook on life will change. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. Charlie equates the materialization of promises sometimes quickly to a spiritual experience and sometimes slowly to a spiritual awakening. Think about that for a minute. Did I tell you these guys were good? So for those of us in the program, this is a great barometer of how effective our program is. Do you know freedom and happiness? Do you comprehend the word serenity and know some peace? Are you genuinely interested in your fellows? Do you still find yourself in fear of people or economic insecurity? Are you not realizing these promises in your recovery? You're not working the program correctly. Maybe you've cut a corner on your fourth step. Maybe you still have some amends that you still need to make. Maybe it's time to really start working with a sponsor. They're called promises for a reason. And the good news is that I don't know one person that's worked this program fearlessly and thoroughly that hasn't realized some, if not all, of these promises for themselves. You have all the resources you need, so get started tonight. Tonight's scripture comes from Matthew, chapter 5, verses 23 and 24, and is the biblical comparison to step 9. And it tells us everything we needed to know about the importance of making these amends. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother or sister, then come and offer your gift. Guys, these amends are tough. Remember, the promises start out by saying, if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, if we are painstaking, we're going to have to feel it if we're going to have peace with others. But that pain is the touchstone to spiritual progress and enables us to realize those promises. So as we close it out tonight, let me share a little challenge that Charlie's sponsor shared with him. Who do you need to make amends to now? Go and do it. I bet by the time you've run out of all those nows on your list, you'll be ready to start with the laters. And by the time you've hit every one of those laters, you'll be ready to start some of the maybes. And by the time you've reached the end of the maybes list, your perspective will have completely changed on this process, and you will actually want to make amends to the nevers on your list. That's my prayer for you tonight, that God will grant you the strength and courage that it's going to take, that wherever you are on the list, you'll challenge yourself to move to that next person on the list or that next section on the list. Thanks for listening and have a great group. I hope to see you guys all soon.